What did ancient humans do when someone got pregnant? There were no hospitals, no ultrasounds, no doctors. Picture giving birth with absolutely none of that. Who would assume it was constant chaos, danger, and death? Here is the uncomfortable twist. Ancient humans were not improvising. They had a system, and parts of it were smarter than you would expect. Let us start with how they even knew someone was pregnant in the first place. There were no tests, obviously. So early humans relied on something else entirely: pattern recognition, passed down through generations of women watching other women, missed cycles, changes in appetite, swelling, fatigue. Older women in the group, especially those who had given birth multiple times themselves, became walking encyclopedias of pregnancy signs. Experience was the technology. Once pregnancy was confirmed, ancient societies did not just wait around. Multiple archaeological cultures show clear evidence of specific behavioral changes tied directly to protecting a pregnant woman. Archaeologists, studying prehistoric figurines, like the famous Venus of Willendorf, found exaggerated depictions of pregnant female bodies dating back over 25,000 years. 25,000 years old. Researchers believe these were not just art. They may have functioned as protective talismans, carried or displayed specifically during pregnancy to invoke fertility and safety. In other words, the anxiety around childbirth was so significant that ancient humans created physical objects specifically to cope with it. That is not primitive thinking, that is emotional problem solving. Now here is where it gets stranger. When labor actually began, most ancient cultures did not treat it as something to hide or handle alone. A group event. Anthropological studies of hunter-gatherer societies found that childbirth was almost never a solitary act. Experienced women, often multiple ones, would gather specifically to assist. This was not just emotional support. These women functioned as the world's first midwives, holding genuine specialized knowledge passed down through direct observation and hands-on experience. 17 BBish. Some anthropologists, studying isolated traditional societies, found that experienced midwives could often predict complications hours in advance, based purely on subtle changes in the mother's breathing, posture, and behavior, knowledge that took years of direct apprenticeship to develop properly. They knew which positions eased pain. They knew warning signs of complications. They knew, in some documented cultures, basic interventions for a baby positioned wrong. 18b. In certain indigenous, American, and African traditional birthing practices, midwives were documented using specific manual techniques to attempt repositioning a breech baby before labor became too advanced, a procedure modern medicine still performs today, just with more equipment involved. The first medical specialists. Speaking of positions, here is something that might surprise you. Most ancient and indigenous birthing traditions did not involve lying down. Researchers studying both historical records and skeletal evidence found that squatting, kneeling, or being supported upright were the dominant birthing positions across most of human history. Lying down is the weedy one. Squatting actually widens the pelvis and uses gravity to assist delivery. Modern lying down birth became common much later, partly for the convenience of doctors observing the process, not necessarily for the mother's benefit. In other words, the position most people picture as natural today might actually be the historically unusual choice. But let us address the brutal reality underneath all of this. Childbirth in the ancient world was genuinely dangerous. There is no romanticizing that part. Death was a real possibility. Anthropologists studying the so-called obstetrical dilemma found that human childbirth is uniquely difficult, compared to almost every other mammal, because of a specific evolutionary trade-off. Human babies have unusually large brains, and human mothers have a pelvis shaped for efficient upright walking. Those two things directly conflict with each other during birth. Evolution created this problem itself. No other major evolutionary advantage humans gained came completely free. Walking upright and having large brains have directly caused one of the most dangerous moments in a woman's entire life, repeated potentially many times across her lifetime. 3TB. Researchers studying skeletal remains across multiple prehistoric sites estimate maternal mortality during childbirth may have ranged anywhere from 1 to 2% per birth in some populations, a number that sounds small until you consider women in many ancient societies gave birth sometimes 8 or more times across their lifetime, compounding that risk significantly with every pregnancy. This is part of why experienced birth assistance was not optional in most ancient cultures. It was survival infrastructure built directly into how human society functioned. Now here is something almost nobody expects. In several documented ancient and indigenous cultures, men were explicitly forbidden from witnessing childbirth at all. Allowed in the Sorium. This was not random superstition in most cases. Researchers studying these traditions suggest the exclusion often served a practical purpose, keeping the birthing space calm, controlled, and led entirely by those with actual hands-on experience. In some cultures, this took an even stranger turn. Anthropologists have documented a practice called couvade, where the father experiences ritualized symptoms mimicking labor himself, moaning, resting, even abstaining from certain foods, while the actual birth happens elsewhere. The father gave birth to. Researchers believe this served a social function, publicly declaring the father's bond to the child and distributing some of the cultural weight of the event, even though he had zero physical involvement in the actual delivery. After birth, the rituals did not stop. Multiple ancient cultures developed specific, deliberate practices around the placenta itself, treating it as something significant, rather than simply discarding it. The placenta was sacred. In some documented traditions, the placenta was buried in a specific location believed to influence the child's future strength, identity, or connection to their homeland. In others, it was offered ritually to protect the newborn from spiritual harm. 40b. Some Pacific Islander and indigenous Australian traditions specifically buried the placenta beneath a newly planted tree, creating a literal, lifelong physical connection between the child and a specific piece of land, one that the child could return to and visit throughout their entire life. Tangible link to their own birth. This single detail reveals something important. Childbirth in ancient societies was not viewed as purely biological. It was layered with meaning, ritual, and deliberate cultural processing, the exact same psychological need humans still have today, just expressed through completely different tools. So what actually happened when someone got pregnant in the ancient world? Ati buelescent, chaos. It was structured, communal, dangerous, deeply ritualized, and run almost entirely by women holding specialized knowledge that modern medicine would later formalize into an entire profession. The primitive pregnant ancestor most people imagine was, in reality, surrounded by a sophisticated support system built from generations of accumulated, hard-won experience. Did you know any of this before today? Drop a comment and tell me, which fact surprised you the most? I read every single one. And if you want more videos that take strange, overlooked questions about human history and actually explain the real science behind them, make sure you are subscribed, because next time we are answering a question even stranger than this one. I will see you in the next video.